Hi, this is ETF.com's Exchange Traded Fridays podcast, a weekly podcast covering developments in the ETF industry. My name is Sumit Roy, and I'm Senior Analyst for ETF.com.
And I'm Jeff Benjamin, ETF.com's Wealth Management Editor. This week, we're talking with Patrick O'Connor, Head of Global Exchange Traded Funds at Franklin Templeton. All right, let's talk about Franklin Templeton's entrance into the ETF space, Patrick, beginning with your being brought on in 2015.
Right. Sounds good, Jeff. So Franklin Templeton officially got into the ETF as a business in 2016 after my hire. Our CEOs at the time, actually CEO Greg Johnson at the time, was interested in getting into the ETF business and asked me early days to consult and try to advise. After coming up with a plan pretty quickly, realized Franklin Templeton has a lot to offer here on a global basis and was interested in what we could do to get into this business.
Mm-hmm. Where did you come from?
So my pedigree, like many of us now that are running businesses, ETF businesses, was from Barclays Global, BGI, and the iShares team. I was fortunate to be on the original iShare team in '99, and my side of it was I was running the investments, the equity investments that was there when we launched on day one.
Okay. And you were hired in 2015. You launched your first ETF how many months later?
We launched our first, and actually what we thought from a strategic standpoint is do a suite of products. We're not here to come and build one product at a time. We really wanted to bring a suite of products, which we did in June of 2016, focusing more on the smart beta capabilities.
Okay. Sumit?
So, Patrick, you've been in the ETF business, like you said, 8 years or so. In that time, what have you learned about expanding into the ETF space?
Yeah, we're fortunate, to be honest, at Franklin, because I've got so many different investment teams and talents and global focus. When I think about learnings, and it is important, I think, to look at learnings, I'll give you a positive one, and it's really around focus. So when you whiteboard an ETF business, and especially since we're not the first asset manager to go into that business, we could have gone in so many different directions. But I think the lesson, that we adhered to was the focus on that. And we specifically targeted regions that we wanted and investment capabilities, and then rolled that out over time. Even, to be honest, launching a passive lineup, which was unheard of at Franklin, and we launched that in 2017.
And do you think that's helping you reach a different market, Patrick? Maybe like financial advisors?
No, for sure. So, as we know, we're very much a TradFi type firm. However, we which has traditional clients, but by having an ETF business now, we're able to go after advisors that have all ETF books, which has been very helpful. We've been able to go after what they call the ETF aggregators, so bigger RIAs that kind of just focus in on the ETFs, and then even we now, because we're building tools, we're actually have clients that were traditional competitors. So, for instance, like a solutions team at another asset manager may use our tools. So we've opened up a whole bunch of different channels and client types.
TradFi, by the way, folks, is traditional finance. The fancy insiders, they use those abbreviated terms, right, Patrick?
Jeff, we just taught you that one, didn't we?
I know. That's why I jumped all over it. Like,
I had to do that. I
love that.
Yeah, okay. I do too.
You got Franklin Templeton, 1.6 trillion, right, in total assets under management.
That's right.
A lot of that, I don't even know how much, but I'm assuming a vast majority in mutual funds still. How has the move into the ETF space impacted your mutual fund business?
I think, it's enhancing not necessarily the mutual fund business, but the investment teams that traditionally have been, managing mutual funds, as you said. Now they're leverageable in a new wrapper. So we can use their existing intelligence and market sophistication to bring new products and new channels. So I think that actually has almost energized the firm. We're about to have our 8th year birthday, and I can tell you when I first started, most of the portfolio managers they didn't know ETFs, they only knew funds, and probably weren't as interested in thinking about ETFs. Now, when I attend the CIO offsites, I'm very excited of how many CIOs want to launch ETFs. So it's really brought out a lot more interest of the traditional managers into our wrappers.
Patrick, in the ETF space, there's so many funds nowadays, over 3,500 at last count. And, there's a lot of heavy hitters, the BlackRocks of the world, and a lot of smaller firms as well. It seems, really crowded. How does, Franklin Templeton distinguish itself in the ETF industry?
It might seem crowded, but remember the pond keeps getting bigger, and more clients keep getting more of our traditional clients are more interested in ETFs. So we have that's a phenomenon that's going on. But as far as Franklin Templeton, I mean, we're one of not many firms at all, really, that has that global footprint and that has so many different investment opportunities that Franklin, and for me, I'm building tools in three main areas that distinguish us. Yes, we have some low-cost passive Country Suite, which is doing very well. We have the Smart Beta, which is what we started at. And then we have the luxury of having tremendous active managers throughout the globe. So we're bringing all these different investment capabilities and also listing them across the globe. So, right now we're 25.5 billion AUM as a global business. 20 billion of that, it's another milestone we just hit, is in the US, but the international is growing quite nicely as well.
As I already referenced, the majority of Franklin Templeton's assets are still in mutual funds. Where is Franklin Templeton with clone ETFs or mutual fund conversions to ETFs?
Yeah, it's definitely topical, and it's one of our success stories, actually. So we don't generally clone, but one of the strategies that we've invoked, again, like I said, we use the same investment teams, but we, for instance, will look at some of our tried and true, biggest, best, oldest strategies. One of them, for instance, is that income fund in the mutual fund. It's one of our oldest and definitely a flagship fund. It's been around for 70 years. The managers and the CIO of that very much wanted to get into the ETF business. So we launched INCM, which isn't a clone, but it is utilizing many of the same investment styles and research that we do on the main fund. And, for instance, on that example, it's been one of our successful funds, launched it almost a year ago. We had 100 million in seed, all external folks that wanted to be part of it. That seed's been long gone, and now the fund is 250 million and growing. So it's kind of it's a good model to say how that's one way we can do.
Mm-hmm.
The other is
let me stay on that for a minute, if you will. Any cannibalization from the mutual fund, and why would somebody invest in one over the other?
Well, clearly, traditionally, multiple retail clients in the fund at $70 billion.
Right.
What we've noticed is we have not noticed cannibalization, but we're starting to, and we've seen this as an industry phenomenon where advisors, RIAs are going to all ETF books. So to that fact, having a ETF, which has a very similar pricing and investment strategy, is appealing for those because if they have to get out of the fund, they don't have to get out of our investment strategy. And right now, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing some of that. But really, again, it's back to your other point. It's new client money for the firm.
Yeah.
That's really where we're seeing it, which is exciting.
Okay. Where does Franklin Templeton stand on ETF share classes? Do you have a filing out there?
We're very interested in it. We don't have a filing on it. And I can't really comment on something we haven't done yet, but believe me, we are looking at it. I would just caveat, though, it isn't necessarily a panacea. Because, and I think the SEC does have things to think about here as far as making sure that if they do approve it, that the new ETF share class would be fair to, the fund would be fair to the ETF share class, especially when some of the funds have a very large embedded gains. But we're, as you said, we have a lot of mutual funds. We're very interested in 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 being part of that discussion and watch that space for us.
Yeah. One other thing I want to discuss with you, Patrick, is the distinction that you made when we had a conversation last week about the Vanguard, I guess the what they have,
Right,
I
the
don't know, their
patent.
patent.
Right.
That is for a passive ETF share class, right? And most of the applications are for active, correct?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions when it's thrown around about the patent has expired.
Mm-hmm.
What Vanguard got years ago from the SEC was a patent on their passive, which worked very well for Vanguard because that's
Mm-hmm.
what the mutual funds are. And so they were able to do share classes off that and then create their ETF line.
Mm-hmm.
They never, that I know, maybe I don't know, that there was a filing for active. So the SEC has never approved a share class off an ETF share class off an active fund, and that's what all the asset managers are trying to file for now.
That's really interesting. So I want to shift gears a little bit, Patrick. We're recording this on Wednesday, May 22nd, and there's a lot of excitement growing that the SEC might approve the first spot Ether ETFs. Of course, spot Bitcoin ETFs were approved earlier this year in January, and Franklin Templeton launched a spot a Bitcoin ETF within that first batch of spot Bitcoin ETFs. And I know as a company, you've been very vocal on social media about the virtues of crypto. Can you talk about that? How important is crypto to Franklin Templeton's future?
Yeah, I think it's, for Franklin, and if you listen to our CEO, Jenny Johnson, who's very vocal on this matter, it's more than just crypto. I think crypto is kind of one of the first tools, at least from the ETF side. But I mean, we are really and have created since 2018, the digital asset group because we want to look at more than just crypto, but how, what technologies around Bitcoin, filing various, SEC registered mutual funds. So we're really interested in the digital space. It did happen that the SEC approved all 9 of our registrations and trading filing on Bitcoin, and we were part of that. And I think in general, we think it can be an alternative, an alternative asset class. And I think if you look in the future, which you might ask me, where do I think that's going? I do think you're going to see more single coin ETFs, and then you're going to see multi-coin ETFs, and then you're going to see various indices. Like that's the natural evolution. And, we want to be part of that.
Hey, I want to wrap up here, Patrick, with just kind of an open-ended question, asking if there's anything else going on at Franklin Templeton. You can break news to us here. You can tell us about some filings you guys are thinking about, or just some areas that you're looking at. I got to imagine you've got a lot of things that you're looking at in the ETF space, right?
No, there are a lot of things, and with my hat, since it's global, I'm looking at all different regions. Not surprisingly, we had our Putnam acquisition. There's a lot of interesting funds and things. We're not going to break any news, sorry guys, but we're looking at what can we do? Maybe there's some conversions there. Maybe there's some really interesting things if there happens to be overlap. So we're really interested in that. I mean, what I just want to impart is the really successful growth that we've had. To be able to go from no assets when we started basically in 2016 to 25.5 billion, it really takes that commitment of our senior management to be able to allow me to create products. We have now 123 products globally. We have, we're in EMEA and we're in US, we're in Canada, we're Mexico and Chile. We're just expanding in Asia now. So to be able to do that's really quite a commitment. And I would just leave listeners here that Franklin is really committed to this space. I increased my team by 1/3 last year in not just sales, but focused on all the different functions that support this business. It's a real exciting time to be a part of Franklin ETFs.
That's big stuff for a TradFi firm, huh?
TradFi. I'll have to
Thanks
get
a
you
lot.
a cooler term.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Thanks for being here, helping us out. Really good stuff.
Enjoyed the chat. Thanks, guys.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find this and all other Exchange Traded Fridays episodes on ETF.com or on any major podcast platform. See you next week.